You guys ready? You feel ready for this? Share?
Good.
Okay. So tell us, right? Like most people that will see this replay or that will be joining us have seen your videos. They know a little bit about your story. So maybe they're a little invested. So share with us kind of each of you, like what you're doing right now and kind of, like how things are going for you. Like give us an update. You can go first, Tiffany.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Woo. How's it going versus how I thought it was going to go? So I actually moved at the top of 2020, moved down here to Atlanta, Georgia. Have never lived in the South before. So really over the past, 9 months that we've been in this pandemic, I've just been working from home. So I'm thankful that my job has that level of flexibility and honestly just try to stay sane. I think that this is abnormal in every sense this year, everything from how the election went down, the cultural pandemic, the global health pandemic. It's just been a lot. So I think a lot of my energy has been towards just trying to stay sane and trying to keep the basics floating. Early in the year, I saw this meme that was like, if you're not starting a business or you're not doing XYZ this year, you're not doing it right. And I was like, delete, like I think it just takes a lot of energy to stay positive and stay grounded in this season. But that's what I've been up to. It's just the basics.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I feel like, especially as this has gone on, like it's sort of exhausting, I think, all of us in different ways. And what about yourself, Danielle?
Yeah. So I'm currently kind of coming out of my work break right now. But my work break happened to coincide with COVID. Unplanned, obviously. And so that has been really interesting. Of some of my goals of my work break were to rest and rejuvenate, and that became easier to do because of COVID. And some of my other goals were to do travel, and so some of that was not able to be done. A little bit of that, but not. It was post COVID, frankly, but. The travel during COVID has not been happening. So that's been change-ups of expectations. And then, as life is wont to do, when you go big, it throws you in with a bunch of stuff. So I now live in a totally different new house. I live with my boyfriend and his son part-time, and he lives with us. And I lived alone before then. And so that's new. Finding a job coming out of, this is interesting in COVID world. So it's all very new and different.
Yes. And I think that's such a, there are people that I talk to now that, now we know about COVID, right? So it's like they're trying to plan a break thinking like, is this a good time to do it? I don't know what's going to happen with COVID. I don't know what's going to happen with the vaccine. Like, is it the wrong time to do it? Should I wait? Should I not? Like, just trying to figure it out because now it's on the radar. And so, I wanted to ask you specifically, Danielle, like, you didn't know when you started your break that COVID was going to happen. And so I'm curious, like, and I mean, I want your honest answer. Like, if you had known, do you feel like you have been able to sort of pivot and make what you needed the break to be? Have you been able to make it be that? Or do you think like if you could go back in time, would you have been like, I would have done it differently. I wouldn't have started. I would have waited, or would you have done it, but maybe a little different? Like, I'm just curious, because hindsight's 2020, but what you kind of would think about that.
Yeah. I think there's a part of me that maybe would have waited to be able to do some of the things I wanted to do. But if I really look at it, I think it went the way it was supposed to go. I'm one of those people that believes that, you got to be an active participant in your life, but there is such a thing as it's going to go the way it's supposed to go. And so there are things that happened on my break that, first of all, I was ready for the break. So that's important to then honor that I took the break. And whatever that is. And even with the changes, like what did come into play were surprising things like the ability to, because of COVID, spend more time with my boyfriend's son when we normally would be passing ships. And so we got to build a better, stronger relationship. going into before we actually moved in together. So that was a blessing in disguise, because he wasn't in school, I wasn't out at work. We were kind of in the same space together, and we got to know each other better and build that relationship. So that's one example of the upside of like, it went the way it was supposed to go. And
yeah, I can relate to that in a different way. You know, like I've told the story a million times, but you know, my brother passed away very unexpectedly, like a week before my break started. And of course, like who wants to start their break, like literally coming off the heels of the worst life event that you've ever survived? But at the same time, like I could not imagine being anywhere else, doing anything else after that happened. Like that was what I needed to like really heal and to sort of like be the person I needed to be, right? And I had this, like you said, I was prepared, I was ready for the break, I had the money saved. And so it was making the most of what I did have. And at that time it was the break. So I think that's really, you know, really important lesson. And I'm glad that like, you know, your experience with it, you can find some silver linings and some things that make it feel sort of like, you know, it was what it needed to be. So I'm just curious for both you and Tiffany, like, have you guys noticed anyone in your orbit talking or having more conversations around the idea of taking a break or making a big shift? I know that I hear it in my world, like it seems like the pandemic has really forced people to evaluate things on a different level, but I'm curious if you guys have heard any of that in your orbits or your worlds.
Yeah, I would say I have heard it. I would say in my orbit, there's been a lot of talk around just burnout and people just acknowledging that we can only take so much as humans. And I'm sure that COVID and everything that this year has been has just accelerated that feeling that people are like, I just need a break. And so I'm always trying to inspire people to let them know that having taken a break, it's something that can be done, scary though it may be. And it's one of those invaluable experiences that I'll never, ever regret doing. But it takes a lot of courage, you know, to step outside and take a break. I think the one thing that stops people from pulling the trigger is honestly like, man, what does the job search look like? During COVID, there is a lot of uncertainty. But what I'll say is, on the other hand, I know of several friends who've gotten new jobs and even better opportunities in this season. So go figure. But yeah, I think people are getting to that point, that burnout, where it's time to do something different.
Yeah, I definitely hear burnout come up a lot in the conversations that I've been hearing and having. What would you say, Danielle? Like, what has your experience been?
I haven't heard, to be honest, I haven't heard, at least in this small sphere that I've been in, of people during this time, that a lot of people going like, oh, what's that? I want to take a break. But the idea that they are acknowledging burnout, or that it's time to reevaluate what they're up to in life and what daily life looks like, I think that's absolutely there. And so to the extent that the conversation of, you know, you can do a timeout, a planned timeout, and that you can come back stronger and more clear about what your intentions are going forward, that is possible, is right there to share when it comes.
Yeah, I like that. So I just want to add like to this conversation that I think it's never going to feel like the right time to make a leap like this. And there's always going to be a reason why it actually is a terrible time. You know, I could give you 50 when I was planning my break. I had a tenant, like I wasn't, you know, I didn't have a lot of money when I was deciding to take a break, and like the thought of trying to save all that money, I still had debt. I still had tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt and student loans. But I feel like right now the conversations that I'm hearing are people that feel like, what is it all worth, right? Because it's kind of like the numbing distractions that maybe made it just okay enough are kind of gone, and that connection with other people in a different way, the activities you might have done, and it's like it's shining a spotlight on the things that you should be grateful for, and also the things that you maybe want to let go of. So I've just found that to be really interesting. And while a lot of people would think maybe people are afraid to be considering a break during a pandemic, I'm actually finding it's generating more conversation, more interest, and kind of speeding the process along for a lot of people, where now they're actually thinking about it. Whereas if before, maybe they could have gone like another 2 or 3 years, you know, before it was time to really make a change. So I want to shift gears a little bit and say, I was recently asked a question, which I did a post about because I thought it was a really great question, even though it's a really simple question. And I wanted to ask both of you, if you had to share, how has a career break changed your life? How would you answer that question? Could you give us, either an example of something that's like notably different in your life, whether it's an external thing, an internal thing, both. But I'm just curious how you guys would answer that question.
That's a good question. Ooh. I always say that, I gotta buy some time. The wheels
Yeah, I
are
know, right? It's like a great question.
That's a good question. I can say for me, it helped me to get in tune with other hats that I wear, taking a career break. And what I mean by that, I think before, honestly, I was so invested in work. Like work was my everything. I basically made work an idol. And I'm not proud of that by any means, but I just kind of wore it as a badge. You go to a networking event, I find myself talking about my job or what company I work for within the first like 1 minute. But taking the career break just helped me realize like I am so much more than Minion 225 at company X, right? Like, because let's be honest, I've been a peon at all these places. So I got in touch with what it meant to be a sister. So I spent a lot more time with my brother during my career break, and we really were a rock for each other as we were both coming off the heels of the grief of losing our mother. I got more in tune with what it meant to be a niece. So I, connected with aunts and uncles that I hadn't literally talked to in years. I got in tune with what it meant to be a friend. So when I was working 80, 90 hours a week, I didn't have time to really connect with my friends. But during the break, I was much more intentional about connecting with my friends and family and people that I care about. So that has been life-changing. And coming out of the break, again, I just realized I'm so much more than just my career. My career is important. I want to make money. I don't want to be broke. I want to, achieve things and have an impact. But that just can't be the end all be all anymore.
I love that. What would you say?
Yeah, so it's somewhat related to what the great points Tiffany was making. For me, it was the blessing of taking yourself out of the rat race purposefully. And this may sound ridiculous, but the opportunity to do absolutely nothing. And like I was trying, yeah, exactly, like nothing.
And see.
Like the blessing of that silence, of, okay, like, what do you want to do right now? And trying to get in touch with your gut instinct and your internal intuition to build that muscle when you do have a life style that looks a little bit busier than when you're on a work break. That has been probably one of the biggest things. And related to Tiffany's point of taking yourself out of that rat race means your identity as that career lady, if that's your thing, which I relate to, it could be really jarring and change up, and it's a good thing that your identity isn't always attached to that. And like, there's something about doing nothing. There's like I signed up and took an online art class, like visual art, and I have a background in performing arts, but I'm not a visual artist by any stretch of the imagination. And it was like, well, what the heck? Like I'm not going into taking this online art class with the idea that I'm going to come out a professional artist. That is not the point. The point is just to play and spend time doing things that normally you wouldn't do, to be thinking in a different way, to be processing life and seeing life through a different lens. And that, no matter what, will always alter your perspective going forward. And that's a good thing in my book.
Yes. And I love the story that you told about like the first thing you did on your first Monday of your break. Like for anyone that didn't see your video, could you just share like, and for Tiffany maybe, like, yeah. Could you share, like, I love this story.
Yeah. So I was asked, what are you going to do? And I said, well, that first Monday of my break, I'm going to wake up whenever I wake up, because I'm not going to set an alarm. And I'm just going to kind of mosey out to my living room in my pajamas, and I'm going to lay on my living room floor and stare up at the ceiling for 10 minutes. And the person turned to me and they were like, 10 minutes. Woo, wow. Why didn't you spend the whole day there? And I was like, well, I hadn't thought about that. I'm so used to thinking in like 15-minute increments due to my schedule on Outlook, or, like I was still coming off of, again, that rat race, calendared up kind of way of living.
Yes. And I just want to add to Danielle, I think it's like critically important for people to learn how to be in a pause, to be able to rest. And I think I've seen people go into a break feeling like they have to be super productive, right? Like, I need to achieve things. It's cool that I can relax and rest and do all of the stuff, right? But like, that's fine. I'll do that like in between the stuff, but like I'm gonna do the things, right? I'm gonna take a class, I'm gonna go on a walk, I'm gonna drink my 8 glasses of water, I'm gonna meditate, I'm gonna make time for my friends, I'm gonna and it's like filled with things, right? And I feel like there's such a power in resting. And it's something that I think it takes people practice, right? You have to have a lot of courage, I think, to lean into rest when you're used to doing and defining yourself through your output and like defining your worthiness through like how productive, how much in service are you to other people. It can be an act of courage to just rest and to allow yourself to believe that in the pause, in that white space, everything will be okay and maybe good things will even come in.
Yeah,
I love that.
I love that, Katrina. Like that's one of the things, like if I could go back on my break, I wish I was more intentional about the rest component. I mean, I did rest, but I'll be honest, like sometimes I felt guilty, and I would judge myself harshly because I didn't cross off all 90 million things on the to-do list, or because it took me longer than I would have wanted to work through like all my mother's affairs after she passed away. And it's like, no, like you got to give yourself that permission to replenish, because that's actually like depositing in the bank account of future productivity, because it's only so long you can run on fumes. So, I encourage anyone who is thinking about a career break to build in that margin to just breathe and be intentional about it and own it. So I love that, Danielle, that you're like, you know what, I'm going to be intentional and not set the alarm. And I am going to look up in the ceiling. Like, I wish I would have given myself more permission to do that during my break without judgment.
Yeah, and I will say, like, there was plenty of times where the judgment was right there. I mean, it's natural instinct to be like, you lazy bum, and so yeah, and so when I'm not keeping myself busy with a calendar and work and obligations, you hear that voice a lot clearer. And so you start to develop a relationship with it, and you get the opportunity to work through the things that maybe are not so kind that you do to yourself in that internal voice, and realize, thanks for sharing. Bye-bye. I'm going to go get a lemonade, whatever. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so I have one more question that I wanted to ask you guys before we open it up. But everyone here that joined us, thank you for coming. And if you have questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or if you want to drop it in the chat, I will ask Danielle and Tiffany your questions. So please feel free to do that. So Danielle and Tiffany, my next question for you is around money. And so I'm curious, I think I know the answer, but I want to ask, right? This is another, I think, sticking point for people is, in hindsight, do you feel like the break was worth the investment and the money that you spent? And if you're able, or even if you have some concept of how much it actually costs you to be on your break and you felt comfortable, could you share that with us? But just in general, how do you feel even now, right? Being in a pandemic, things are uncertain, although they're always, I would argue, uncertain, but they can feel maybe extra uncertain. How do you feel about that money spent and the investment that you made in yourself?
Do you want to go?
Sure. Definitely money well spent. I think for me, I was planning for a break and didn't realize it. And I mean, I always was one of those people to keep a rainy day stash. I always knew there was going to come a day that I needed to go into this stash. And when my mom died, or even before that, when she was diagnosed with cancer and all that, I was like, yep, this is the time to go ahead and pull the trigger, because I knew how, just gut-wrenching that experience was going to be. And I was in the mindset, I didn't want to shortchange my mom and my family, and I didn't want to shortchange my job either. And it's kind of hard to do both. And so I was like, you know what, here's the time to do it. But we can't deny the practical reality of we got to eat, we have to have a roof over our heads, we have to pay bills. I think what helped me is, one, having the savings, but the other part that helped is I just pared down my lifestyle. I stripped out all the fat, the things that really I didn't need, the nice to have. So I stopped shopping as much. I stopped traveling quite as much, although I still traveled during my break. What else did I do? I stopped eating takeout, which is probably the biggest budget buster for me, because I'm single and I live by myself. So it's so easy to just drop $20, $30 or more every day just on takeout. So I stripped that out and I got in the kitchen and I made myself cook. So I was kind of approaching it from both ends. Like, yeah, I had this money saved, but I'm going to try to stretch it as much as possible by thinking about my expenses and being mindful, but totally worth it. If I had to think numbers, gosh, I never really did this exercise in detail, but it probably cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $30,000 to take the career break. So that's substantial.
And
but
how
then
long
again,
was the break?
about a year.
Okay.
About a year. But then when you think about it, that's how much money do we waste again, like on those silly, more frivolous things. So I think it was well worth it. And I think I'll continue to see the ROI on that investment over time. Now, too bad I can't take career breaks every year. It'll probably be a while before I get to do another one, but no regrets.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I agree. No regrets. What do I want to say? I also saved up for it. It took me, I think, 2.5 years to finally get the guts to actually take the break. So I had been considering it for a while, and similar to Tiffany, I was putting money away for a rainy day, not knowing, and then realizing, oh, this is what this is going to go towards. It was great. I am now what I call in re-entry. So I'm looking for a job. I've been lucky in having contract work come my way. So I've been working occasionally part-time on things, and that's extended the break even further. But it's been about 9 months, 10 months that I've been on the break. And I think all in, mine was actually more like 40,000. But that included an over $10,000 trip of a lifetime for 3 weeks to New Zealand, going hiking and kayaking and biking and hiking through Middle Earth. And so that was a planned major expense of a huge bucket list trip that I wanted to take. So that ate up more. So realistically, it's been a little under 30 for me in what my life expenses are. But you be smart about it. I will say that I'm one of those that's like, you have to have money in the bank and where's my next paycheck coming from? Like I'm very organized like that. And this experience has created an opportunity to view money in what I believe for myself is a healthier viewpoint. It's not that it's not important or that you need to go seek it out and be attentive to that. But addressing the fear behind not having money, that's a really powerful power to have in one's repertoire, to be able to feel that much more unbounded about how you're conducting your life and what you're up to.
Wow, that is huge. I mean, I so agree with that. And so much. I like co-sign on all of that. So and just to add in, like for myself, like my break similarly was in the same range. I traveled for 20 months and I spent about $40,000 to do that. And it included some time at home, which clearly not spending as much. And then it involved like living abroad, traveling abroad, doing a $3,200 yoga teacher training. So it was definitely like a mix of things. But I think it changed my relationship to money as well. And that first break is the reason that I ended up on break number 2, because I suddenly felt like I had this shift where there is something about having resources and knowing you're going to be okay. But it's like this, it's almost like it's never enough, right? And so it's this idea like I have to keep stocking it away. And it's like your brain keeps creating worst case scenarios on top of worst case scenarios. So like if I get cancer, that's one thing, but what if I get cancer and then like they have to remove my lung and then like I'm in rehab for a year and then like my son gets sick or it's just like it just keeps building. It's never enough. And so I think there's an element of realizing what you really need and getting back in touch with what you need and knowing like when you have enough truly and not like this rainy day can never come. Because I see a lot of people store money for that rainy day and it's like, the rainy day is never, they could literally be miserable, crying every day and like feeling broken. And they're like, yeah, but it could get worse. So I'm just going to like keep my money just in case a really bad day happens. And it's like, you're living your bad day every day, So I have a question that, a couple questions that popped up around money. So Danielle, I think you mentioned you are starting to take some contract work, but the question is, did either of you engage in income generating activities? So maybe part-time, doing a hobby that paid, something you enjoyed, but was there any type of income generation going on during your break? And so Danielle, I think you started like accepting contract work. Were you doing anything before that? And then Tiffany, was there anything that came into your world that was like income generating?
That was it for me, was just in my specialty and what I do, and using the network. Contract work has come up, and so it's popped up, and I've taken those different opportunities. And some have been larger contracts, some have been one-day contracts. But that's the extent for me. How about you, Tiffany?
Yeah, not in a material way. There were probably a couple of times where I did little piddly things that brought in money, but not anything big. I did consider for a hot second doing something in the gig economy, like driving for Uber Eats. I don't think I could do like Uber all the way, the rideshare part of it, but I thought about it, but I just never pursued it. And I acknowledge that I was fortunate in that I went into my break, unplanned though it may have been, having saved over years, like 10 plus years, I have been saving. So I could take the break relatively comfortably. And I was living in Cincinnati, which is a lower cost of living market anyway. I don't know if I could have taken the same type of break in Chicago, where I was living during the time that my mom got sick. So I realized that there were just some variables and factors that made it more feasible for me than maybe someone else. But yeah, no, I didn't bring in any bacon in a meaningful way during that time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it sounds like you made choices, Tiffany, that supported you being on a break, right? Like, I think that's the thing, is like when you are stepping into that, you're sort of looking holistically at what's important, and you're willing to make trade-offs for things like you said, reducing takeout, thinking about where are you going to live, where is your home going to be, so that you can afford it. So one of the follow-up questions is, were your guys' budgets that you gave, so those estimates, were they inclusive of static expenses? So things like insurance, car insurance, health insurance, cell phone. Just to quickly answer that for myself, mine was inclusive. So I consider like everything that I spent, whether it was to keep my old life on pause, which is like storing my car, like paying bills. I had a mortgage and I had a tenant, but I was losing money on it every month because it was a bad time to be a landlord. All of that stuff is included for me in my number of 40,000. So just to check in with you guys, was yours including like sort of everything, including static expenses, would you say?
Yeah.
Yes. So for me, one of the things that kind of helped, it was inclusive of all those bills. I was living in my deceased mother's home, but the house was not paid off. So I was still paying her mortgage to live there. But that mortgage, I would say, is less than what the going rate was for rent back in Chicago. So that made it manageable. But yeah, what did I say, 20 to 30, 25 to 30 covered everything, and even a few trips here and there. So I had some fun, just not extreme, fun. But in hindsight, I wish I would have planned for that. If I could do it all over again.
Yeah, sprinkled in a little of that.
Yeah.
So the last question, sort of in the budget thing that came up is, did you guys have health insurance while you were on your break? And if so, do you remember how much it cost? So I can just speak for myself and say, when I was on my break, at some point I went onto the exchange, I believe I did. I got some type of health insurance that was like sort of on your own, and it was very like catastrophic, just in case something happened. But I also spent a lot of time traveling abroad. So at the time I went with World Nomads, and I paid to have like a travel insurance policy, which is like if something happened while I was away, it would get covered. And I don't remember how much it was, but I was like 30, I think probably like 32 at the time. So I think at that time it was a couple $100, like maybe $700 for the year. I have a really hard time remembering, but that's what I can remember. But yeah, I had like a catastrophic US thing that was really cheap. And then for part of the time I was traveling, and I just didn't worry about the US stuff, and I went with World Nomads. Did you guys do anything different with you guys were both pretty much in the US. I mean, minus your big exciting trip, Danielle, but did you guys did you do something different for your insurance? Like, did you have to change because you had employer provided health insurance before?
Yeah, so mine was a bit of a hybrid. So they give you COBRA, for I think up to 18 months, or it's an option. It's very expensive though. So I think I did Cobra for like a couple of months after I quit my job. And then I went on the exchange because without income, I was able to qualify for that. And I did that for the remainder of the time until I was employed again. And I think, gosh, I don't quite remember, but like the $300 per month range sticks in my head for the exchange. And that's probably a function of the type of plan that I have. It wasn't a catastrophic plan, but it certainly wasn't the Cadillac plan either. It was probably somewhere in between. But knock on wood, thank God, like I didn't have any health issues during that career break. But I certainly didn't feel comfortable not having health insurance. So I was glad for ACA in that case.
Yeah. I think the health insurance thing was the trickiest thing, and I still don't know if I navigated it well. So I want to give that disclaimer. But I left a job to go on my work break, and they offered Cobra, and I decided to do Cobra for the first couple of months, which is not cheap. It's just shy of like $800 a month. But I was like, I'm about to launch myself off of cliffs in New Zealand and go on helicopter rides and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna eat it because I don't. And then so I decided to do monthly Cobra payments. So I still had the full boat of insurance that I enjoyed when I was fully employed. And then when I came back, I actually through flight travel contracted COVID and got pretty sick. I didn't have to be hospitalized, but I actually ended up getting sick and weathered the storm at home. And I'm really glad that I had insurance to be able to do the testing afterwards and different things that I needed. And for me, just in my own life, health insurance is something that has been important. And so with the fact that COVID happened, not just the whole world of COVID happened, not that I had it necessarily, I was willing to then be like, okay, I'm going to alter out some of my costs of living because I want to continue to have Cobra because I don't want to mess around with this world pandemic right now and the situation and not be on health insurance that I know with doctors that I've been seeing for 20 years. So I would say that there's a really great opportunity to use the marketplace and you can get a cheaper rate than considering Cobra, or you could figure out how many months leaving your job, whatever your situation is, leaving your job, you want to pay for Cobra, and then when you're willing to make the break to the marketplace and pay for a little less of an insurance policy, a medical insurance policy, because you're comfortable with that. I would say I'm not the most knowledgeable about all of that, and I'm still figuring out like what is the best move for me. So the questioning never ends, but that's what I've done with my break so far and the circumstances of why.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective too, because again, things that I didn't have to consider when I was on my break. And so much of my break was abroad, but you know, I'm on the exchange now as a business owner, right? Because I don't have an employer. So it's like, I think the career break was great preparation, you know, for like just knowing what your options are and sort of like you said, breaking out of the rat race. It's like in many ways good and bad and scary and really inspiring. Like you question everything and you have so many options and you really see what is available to you. And sometimes you miss the things that you had in the rat race and you're like, oh, that was so cushy or that was so nice. But then I think you figure out that there are other solutions, right? Or there are other alternatives and which ones do you feel comfortable making and which ones do you not? But I credit, I think, being able to be a business owner with that career break because I don't know that I could have jumped from the safety of having that employer job where I got all the benefits and I had the health insurance and the steady salary that was really good to like running my own business without that sort of motivation, inspiration, and new perspective in between. So I co-sign on all of that. Okay. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you guys, and I know this requires like going back in the memory banks, but you know, a lot of people I think that I've talked to recently, they don't want to regret their break, right? Like they want to be smart about it. They want to set it up. But I think there's also an element of you have to stay open and you have to be like able to flow because things change. That's just life, whether you're on a break or not. But I'm just curious, like, did you guys ever wrestle with kind of a like, what the hell kind of moment where you questioned like, why did I want to do this? Or like, what am I doing right now? Like, am I making a huge mistake? I'm just curious. If you did, can you like tell us about it? And if you didn't, that's fine too. But I'm just curious if you ever had a moment where you were sort of faced with like, what the hell have I done?
I did several times throughout the journey. And you have to understand like my background and where I came from. I didn't come from a lot of money. So like security is big for me. And like I know what it's like to not have enough money based on my childhood. So the idea that I would walk away from good money to take this break, sometimes I would be like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is crazy. But I'll tell you the other place where it came up, where I had those WTF moments, is when I allowed myself to compare myself to others. So at the same time that I was like on this break and trying to find myself, you know, after losing my mom, I had friends that I love dearly that were getting promoted, traveling, in relationships. They were doing all the things. And when I would look inward, sometimes I would be overly critical on myself and be like, well, what are you doing? You know, your network is killing it out here and you're just on the couch, like, you know, directionless. But I had to stop that. And I had to stop allowing that gremlin voice. I think you talked about it earlier, Danielle. I had to stop letting it have so much power and get back to the intention of why I was taking the break. And one of the things that gave me comfort and peace and why I was doing it is money to me is like a renewable resource. It ebbs and flows throughout our life. But I mean, if you're, you know, reasonably smart, ambitious, you can find ways to make money. But the one thing you can't get back is time. Every time the hand on the clock ticks, like we're getting closer to our end. So not to sound morbid, but that was just a reminder to me, like, let me take this time because I don't know when I'll ever get this type of time again in life. And I really needed it. So yeah, but yes, I did have some moments of like, I don't know if this is the right thing. But again, no regrets when I look back.
Yeah. I'm not remembering a time where I was like, when I was in the break thinking, you're crazy. Like, what are we doing? I kind of really just was really okay with it. That doesn't mean that like, I like that term gremlins didn't pop up as far as like, you're being lazy or what are you going to do coming out of this to, you know, hit the ground running. Those thoughts were all right there, but I surprised myself in really enjoying and being totally okay with it. And maybe it was because I put myself through 2.5 years of like planning for that. And all of that was happening then that I was just delighted to finally be on it and have a new conversation in my head. I don't know.
No, I like that. And I think you're right. Like, I think the being able to plan for it, you know, unlike Tiffany's experience, you know, maybe in the back of her mind, she was hoping for it, but like the diligent sort of planning and the feeling of delayed, maybe that, you know, like you kind of work through that stuff in the beginning. I think for me, similar to kind of like a mix of both of you. So on the break itself, like I was living my best life and there were definitely hard moments, right? Where I'm just like, what the hell? But it was more like, what the hell's happening in my life, period, full stop. Like I would have felt that way in my job. But I was really like embracing all that the break was. Similar to Danielle, I'd planned for it, I'd saved for it, I worked so hard, and I was like living my dream. But similar to Tiffany, I can relate. Compare and despair is so freaking real, and it will steal your joy in like a nanosecond, right? If you let it. And so I think for me, I was on the break, but then part of my reentry period, which I want to talk about that in a second, but part of my reentry period was figuring out what do I want to do next? Because I knew I didn't really want to go back to corporate, but that was what I knew. I still had like 40-something thousand in business school student loans. And so it's like, at that point when I came back and it's like, Katrina, you still don't know what you want to do? You didn't have some grand epiphany on the beach in Thailand? Like, loser, right? Like, what the hell did you just spend all this money on? You could have paid off your debt. You could have been debt free. Like, why did you do this? Like, I definitely felt like the pressure of coming back, seeing all my friends, right? Like having moved forward in their career or maybe bought a house or doing things with, you know, their money and their time towards their career or like the material things. I definitely felt like coming back to the real world, trying to think about how I integrate and fit back into it, and seeing what everybody else was doing really added some anxiety and some questions around what was I doing. But I think that is why I'm a huge proponent of a reentry period where you are legit focused on transitioning back, because I think transitions are messy. And so for me, my transition involved a period of crying, like just real true like anger and pissed offness of like, why do I have to leave my break? Like, why do I have to be broke now? Why do I have to go back and get a job? I don't want to work. I don't know what I want to do. Why can't I just know what I want to do? Like, I was having so much drama. And I think that's just part of the process. It's part of the big change. And so I'm a huge believer in giving yourself the space and time to process those things and to really get clear on what you want next, instead of jumping out of a place of desperation or panic. So now I want to throw it out to you two, Tiffany and Danielle, and ask, what could you share with us, like what your reentry period is or was like, and like, you know, was it messy? Was it neat? Like just kind of sharing with us what that ramp back to like real life looked like for you.
You want to go?
Sure. Like you, me. The reentry period. I'm going to be honest, it was a little dark. Dark in that, if I'm really honest, I don't think I was quite mentally and emotionally ready to go back, but I kind of accelerated it beyond like the natural course to go back because, again, those fears, right? Like I'm seeing the bank account dwindle. I'm seeing what my peers are doing. And oh, by the way, like this awesome opportunity kind of fell in my lap through some networking. So it was like, oh, you'd be crazy to turn down this opportunity with this huge company. So I went back, but I will tell you that that was the first time that I felt the grief in a really profound way. I mean, I felt it in Cincinnati, but I think I realized when I went back to Chicago and back to the normal rigmarole of life, like how much I miss my mother and what a fixture she was in my day-to-day life. So I felt that thing, and it was hard to reenter, to be quite honest. But some of the things that helped, you know, I'm a big fan of therapy. So I had a therapist, I had awesome coaches like you, Katrina, and I had like just a great support network. And over time, I kind of found my grounding, and I, you know, came to a place of acceptance. Like, okay, my mother, she's not coming back, but I've got to live my life. I've got to, you know, earn my crown on this earth, so to speak. So over time, it certainly got better. But I remember those first couple of months back where they were rough. And even just on a very practical level, like, you mean I have to wake up and I have to be on at 8 a.m. for a meeting? Like, I haven't had to do that in a year. Like, this is crazy. And so I remember being pretty exhausted just with the practicalities of going back to work. But in time, as things tend to, I felt like I hit my stride.
That's awesome. Thank you. I got a lot out of what you just shared too, because I'm in the midst of it, of figuring out what every entry looks like. And I mentioned that I've been taking on some contract work, and that alone of like getting up and like looking professional, and now it's a world of Zoom meetings or some sort of platform for virtual meetings, and using my brain in that way was like, ooh, okay, we got to restart, you know, jumpstart this again. And that can be kind of a rocky road. Also trying to figure out like, there were epiphanies in my break, but there wasn't one that was like, yes, you should open up your own LLC and do a consulting gig as opposed to looking for full-time work, which is one of the questions I've been asking myself during this process, versus go be this other thing in this other career. You know, like I didn't have the vision, like you also did not have the vision on that beach in Thailand, Katrina, of like, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Like taking a break it doesn't take you out of living life and what that's like. It gives you maybe a timeout, it gives you a refresher, it gives you whatever it is you're looking for, you're going to get it. But it doesn't mean that magically everything that you're wondering about your life is going to be sorted out. It maybe just has you in a more empowered place if you needed that break to navigate those questions as you come out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true. Like real life doesn't stop, right? Like you kind of take it as it comes. But I think that like what you were saying, the power of a break is that you come back as version 4.0, right? Like you're rested, you're inspired, maybe you're more connected to yourself. And so all those things that you want to create, that you need to create, that you're trying to bring into your life, so much more accessible. and from a place of inspiration than like the burned out version of you that's exhausted, tired, like disconnected from yourself and everyone else. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. And that actually relates to, so we have two more questions. One question is related, and it's, what if you don't want to come back to what you previously had? So like your previous type of position or your regular 9-to-5 job. If you're more sure of what you don't want to do rather than what you want to do, how do you figure things out? So I'll go first really quickly, but I would love to hear from you guys what you think on that. But for me, I really had no idea. And that was the breakdown, right? The crying, the anger, the whatever. It was because I felt like I did not want to come back to corporate. However, Katrina had like $45,000 worth of MBA loans and a townhouse in Atlanta that had a tenant that at any point could leave. And then I would be on the hook for like, you know, $1,800 a month of like bills, utilities, mortgage, home equity, all that stuff. So I had to really ask myself, like, what is my biggest next goal? And I could have said, go off and be a life coach, because I thought maybe I wanted to do that. I even took like some community ed classes to like learn more about like what the business of being a life coach was, like what a life coach did, things like just to get educated on that. But what was true for me is that I wanted to be debt free, because I was looking for me holistically at the rest of my life. And I felt like if I could eliminate my debt and my student loans and just be this freer version of me with no financial obligations, the rest of my life I could choose me. The rest of my life I could do what I wanted to do. And as long as I pared down my expenses, I was free to do whatever the F I wanted to do, right? So for me, what was true is I had no idea really what I was going to do next. So in the absence of feeling inspired to go create something or do something, and just knowing it was the right thing, I was like, what is it that I really want to achieve for myself? And the answer is be debt free. So I went back to corporate, paid off my debt, saved a little money, got certified as a life coach. And then I was able to leap into starting my own business, which I put on pause to travel some more for like 18 months, which was amazing. And then come back and like really lean into restarting it, relaunching it, and focusing exclusively on career breaks. So that is my answer to that question. Do you guys have anything that you'd like to say on that?
You know, I wish I was going to get that golden epiphany on my break, right? Because I too was like very anti-corporate. I was like, I cannot do this, like just convinced that corporate was not for me. But there are just certain practicalities, you know, debt or financial goals that I had, and corporate is a good way to help me get towards some of those goals. But one of the things I got really clear on is it wasn't so much the work that was like killing me and driving the burnout. It was the type of environments where I chose to do the work. So bumped my head up against the wall, and I'm thankful for every opportunity I've had work-wise, but I feel like I'm finally at a place here in Atlanta where I'm at a company. It's still corporate America, but it fits me, it suits me. I'm a good culture fit. I can get with the mission of the organization. So that has been a phenomenal change. So I say all that to say, like, I did think about wanting to be like a counselor, for instance. I thought about like career coaching at the collegiate level, and I did a little bit of exploring those things, but I didn't get that ultimate spark, like, yes, this is what I need to do. So then I said, okay, I've got all these skills in corporate. I can go back, but I'm going to be way more selective this time around about culture and things like that that impact my day-to-day experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I will say, Katrina, during my reentry, you're coaching to me about, like, I think you worded it as like, what's the next right step? Not that the choice you make of whatever job I may take or whatever course I may go with regards to my career in particular, that is going to, you know, life changes. So like, it could be just for the next 6 months to a year. It doesn't have to be like, okay, now I know exactly what I'm going to do in my career for the rest of my life. Like, putting that kind of pressure on yourself is probably going to be really detrimental to your ability to play in the creative space of what your next right step is, because you can always change and make a next step and then a next step and then a next step. So that concept has been very helpful. And speaking to the person that asked the question, like, I so get you when you're saying, I know what I don't want to do. I have not landed on what I do want to do. Yes. And I think that's a very fair reality for a lot of people. Like, I would imagine every single person on this call right now that can hear my voice, like, we're adventurers. Like there's a lot of different pathways that you can go because you have so many different interests and different ideas of how you want to live your life. And that's a good thing. And it's a case of what's the next thing, not what is the thing, I guess, is what I want to say to that.
Yes, I love that. And I'm so on board with that. That was actually what I wanted to add that. And you just said it so eloquently. No, you said it perfectly. So I'm glad that you shared that. And I'm glad that was helpful to you, because I think at the end of the day, it is like one, right? Like absolving yourself of the responsibility of making a decision that you can't change your mind on, or you can't undo. I think that's the benefit of a break. One of the benefits is that you change your whole life. Like you stop the show and you go change your whole life, and you realize at any given point in time, you can always change your life, right? Like it is available to you. So if you think you want to do something and you're not sure, you could try it, right? If I had been debt-free when I came out of my break, I would have definitely started experimenting. And I think if you know for sure you absolutely don't want to come back to a 9-to-5, I think the easy default is picking up contract work or being a freelancer based on past experiences and past connections to bring some money in while you're figuring things out. But you can use that re-entry period to take a chance and to dabble on things and have sort of a more gradual ramp up before you absolutely need money if you want to try things out. So you definitely don't have to go back. But I think what was true for myself, and it sounds like for Tiffany for sure, is that, the next right step for us was kind of going back to what we knew, to pull in the money that we needed to do the next thing. And for me, that was buy my freedom and get debt free, right? And I think Danielle is navigating that right now. And, it's for her, it's giving herself permission to be open to the opportunities and see what fits and what feels like her next right step, without feeling like, if I make the wrong choice, I have just undone every single thing that I have created on this break, and all of the magic will be poof, evaporated, and I have failed, right? Because it's not that at all. So I think that's really important, to think about that and to remember that and kind of take the pressure off. So,
yeah, can I just share really quick? So I totally relate to all of that, and sharing with you the tough side, re-entry. I've interviewed for 2 different jobs and not been a final candidate for either one. And so working with your ego on, I'm not sure if I even wanted that job, but I wasn't picked, right? And so that feels icky. And of course I'm in tears. I'm upset I didn't get picked. And then I'm like, should I not have left the working world? What's, the gremlins are going, and you all know what we're talking about because it's a human nature thing. So it's not pretty some days these days, but it's related to the concept of feeling trapped. Going on this break, you had asked what's one of your biggest things that came out of there, whatever life changes, to have the guts to take a time out, whatever that looks like for you, and go do something that you want to do, or do nothing that puts you in relationship to life in a different way, where you could do it again if you needed to, and that you're not trapped. I may have a moment of fear about wow, I didn't get that job. I don't even know if I wanted it, but it would have been really plush, and I could have entered in coming out of this with this wham bam awesome job, and my ego would have been woohoo, I'm cool. And that's not happening right now for me. And so but I know that I'm not trapped. And sometimes maybe that's what it's all about, is whatever job you're in, it really feels the worst when you feel trapped in your situation, not necessarily even what you're doing. And so the mindset that taking a break can offer that, and other things can offer that too, but I just wanted to add in that it is who you're being and what your experience of life is versus what your life looks like coming out of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think there's an element of selectivity that comes, once you've done the thing and you've escaped the rat race and you've taken the break, I think there are certain things you're not willing to settle for. If you, Danielle, were I absolutely have to have a job tomorrow, F this. I mean, you have a real purpose, soul mission. You're trying to help the world and have this service impact job. And you also have a lot of great experience that you want to be acknowledged. But if you were I got to make the money, you would go find a way to make the money. But I think there's an element of selectivity that you come out of the break with, if you financially can afford to, right? Kind of suspend that. And Tiffany was saying, choose something more aligned and something better fit for where you are, feeling more empowered to be able to call that in and know like what you're capable of and not be so afraid. And to your point, Danielle, not feel trapped. So LD, who wrote that question, just said, thanks so much. It's good to know that it's okay to not have a 5-year plan. Absolutely.
Have one.
Whoever had pandemic on their plan, like that's just not even a thing. Like it's out. Quick question somebody asked me was, did I keep my townhouse or sell it to be totally debt free? So I just want to answer this real quick because it's an easy answer. Break number 1, I just saved $40,000. I kept my townhouse. I had a tenant. I was very lucky. She did not leave while I was on my break. So that worked out okay. But I kept it totally neutral. However, break number 2 came about because I had already made plans to leave my last corporate job and fully like embrace the life coaching, starting my own business, and the opportunity to sell my townhouse came up. So I did sell it. I did not make money on it, but because I'd owned it for 14 years, I'd paid like a lot of equity into it. So I was able to take some money out. And at the end of the day, when I had that money and I wasn't feeling totally aligned with my business, I was like, you know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to do career break number 2. And that is what happened. So actually my second career break was not planned at all. And it did come solely because I hadn't really saved for it. It came through selling my townhouse. So that's a good question. That was from Twyla. So that was a good question too. Okay. So we have another question from Nadia, and let me find it here. So it was about, how you guys talk about your break. So did any of us come up with a really jazzy description to explain or label our break? To simply call it a break could seem overly simplistic. It's to take this time that's so luxurious as well as courageous. So I guess it comes down to like, are you guys, for you, Danielle, and like, did you, for you, Tiffany, like, how did you guys talk about your break? I definitely have a thing I want to say about this. I'm gonna let you guys go first, but like, how did you share when it was time to share with other people coming back in what you had done? Like, how did you guys talk about it?
For me, I called it when I was talking in the professional, it was in from my personal world too. I called it a planned work break. And people were like, oh, and then they were like asking more questions like, oh, like a sabbatical. And I was like, yeah, it's like a sabbatical, except I'm not going back to the job that in the company that I worked for. But I love the idea of naming it something fun. I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, I do too. I want to know what she comes up with, because I'm like, oh, that's good. What about you, Tiffany? How did you talk about it? Like, what language did you use to describe what had happened? Like, what were you calling it? Or how did you describe it?
You know, I didn't come up with a pithy name, but it's never too late. Like, I want to reflect on that and come up with a good name for it. But I think if people ask me, I would say like I was on a sabbatical, but I typically talked about the why. And for me, it was just the grief and the process of losing my mother. And when it came time to explaining that to employers, like, I actually didn't get any flack. There were for sure jobs that I applied for that I didn't get. But I don't think it was because of that. So I want people to be encouraged too, that life does go on after a break, and you don't just short circuit all your opportunities just because you take a break. It may take long. There may be some frustration. There may be some no's, but like the yes absolutely will come. And if anything, that could suggest that there's alignment in values with the organization or the opportunity, or even if you do something on your own entrepreneurial, if there's just an understanding of, your break. I think a lot of people actually respect it and admire it more than you think. And I got a lot more admiration when I shared the fact that I had taken a break than like people being like, why would you ever do that? If anything, to the point of people feeling stuck, they feel like they can't do it. And we're all 3 witnesses that you can, and you can see the other side of it and be better for it.
Totally. And LD suggested fun employment. I like that.
I like that.
So I'm going to get on my soapbox right now, because this is one of the things I'm like passionate about. And that is like, you're the one that decides how people see your break, because your energy about it, your perspective about it is like what other people absorb, because it's weird and it's unconventional and it's kind of amazing. So people don't really have like a lot of bias where you're like, oh, I took a break. And they're like, oh yeah, I know 45 people that did that. This is what I think about a break. They're kind of like, you did what? How do I feel about this? And then you decide how they feel about it, right? So my thing is, when I came back, I definitely called it a break. It was like, I went on a break and I traveled around the world. It's kind of like my story. I did a lot more than that, but I think that was like the easy, sexy thing to say. And it was true, but it like kind of left some other stuff out. But for me, what was true is when I came back, I wanted to talk about it. Like, it was the most fantastic freaking thing I had done. Now, admittedly, you know, like for Tiffany, sort of unplanned break, right? Like it's a whole different conversation about like how you came into that. But I think we got similar things out of that experience. But for me, like being super intentional about going into it, I definitely was not going to shortchange all of the work I put into saving for it, planning for it at the end and be like, well, I took a break. Like, it was not like that at all. It was like, I took a break. I traveled around the world. I did this, I did this, I did this, like all the things I did. And it's like, do you want to hear more about it? And in the interviews, people were like, actually, yes, I do. And so like half of my interview would be like, what was your favorite place? Were you afraid? What was it like to travel alone? What was something that you learned from your break, right? Like, but I influenced the way that they saw my break because I felt very confident about it, right? And so even if it is unplanned, I think there's a grounding point of like, what has this break taught me? What is it that I want in the future? How am I better suited to show up for myself in my life based on what I've learned? And I think that's true for everyone, no matter like when you take a pause and you leave the rat race, like you get perspective. It's a fact. And I think what do you do with that perspective and how do you portray that to other people can be really beneficial. So I didn't have a fun word, but I definitely had the fun energy behind it when I was talking about it. So that would be my answer on that.
That's good. And I would just add that I had unapologetic energy. I think mine has a little bit more of a sad undertone, what brought me to taking it. But like to your point, like I didn't go into interviews like, oh, I took this break. Would you please hire me? It was like, no, like this is why I did it. Like I love my mother to death and this impacted me this way. But I'm so glad that I did it. And if anyone would want to dismiss that, that's already the litmus test right there, that's probably not an environment that I would need to be a part of. So, you know, owning it is key.
Yes. And I love that too. And it's kind of like, just what is your integrity? Like, what are you made of? Like, you honored your mom by taking care of yourself, right? Like, this really terrible thing happened. And like, I showed up for myself and I honored like that perspective that I had. And I like did the thing I needed to do, even though it wasn't easy. And even though I was in the middle of grief and it was like trying to manage, you know, like my ego and all of the things, right? Like, I feel like there's a strength to that. And so to your point, like you can show up unapologetically and be like, I was strong and I like built my shit back up and I got my stuff together. And I, you know, like I learned a lot from this experience and I'm not sorry for that. And so I think like, again, you set the tone for how people receive that break. So I don't think we have any other questions. If anybody had like a last minute question you want to throw in, feel free to do that. But Danielle and Tiffany, like I asked you guys to come on and kind of freestyle with me some question and answer, and you guys did a fabulous job. I love and appreciate you both so much, and I really appreciate like your honesty and just the intention that you show up with to really share and help others with your story. So I really appreciate you both taking time to be here. Is there anything that you guys wanted to share? Any words, closing words, summary thoughts that you wanted to share before we wrap it up?
I would just say, like, for those of you that are on right now and that might listen in the future, like, kudos to you for thinking about being the director of your life. And if something's coming to you about taking a break or changing things up, I always think that's a really great thing, because certainly this year has brought it really under the spotlight, but tomorrow is not guaranteed for any of us. And so if you're feeling a calling in your gut instinct to go try something new or change something up, I applaud you in honoring that inquiry and what you decide to do with it. So yeah, kudos. And LD, I saw the warm hugs. Thank you. I send them right back to you and everyone else as well. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Man, that was so eloquently put, Danielle. I really don't have anything great to add. Just to repeat what I had said earlier, and it's to what you were saying, like time is just not a renewable resource. And I think 2020 has taught us that in some of the harshest ways possible. So really think about what you need and honor that. And it may not have to be a year-long break like we've talked about today. It might be a couple of weeks, you know, it could be that you just keep putting off taking that vacation time, or it could be longer than a year that you need, but whatever that is that you need, like honor that, because time isn't always on our side, and the money will come, knock on wood. So Yes. Thank you all for allowing me to have a chance to share today.
Yeah, thank you.
Fast. This is why I asked you to come on. I just knew it was going to be good. So, because I want you guys to go away with warm fuzzies, I just wanted to share that. We're getting like a lot of really nice comments in the Zoom chat. And so Twyla wants you guys to know that it was an amazing conversation. And she says, thank you so much for sharing with us. And LD says that it was really candid and helpful. Sophie agrees. And Nadia says, you three were wonderful, so relatable, fun, and vibrant. Appreciate your realness too. So I feel like this is success for me. I really wanted to come on and have people feel empowered, inspired, and just better informed, right? And I think you guys both have great stories to share. And I appreciate that you've shared even more of them with me today to help others. So I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. We're going to record we recorded it, so there'll be a replay, but thank you to everybody who came tonight to ask the questions. They were great questions. And again, Danielle, Tiffany, you know I love you both, and I really appreciate you guys being here. So thank you.
Thank you. Take good care, everybody. Have fun conducting your life.
Yeah.
That's right.
Awesomely awesome. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.